Kelly Bazzani. It's so great to see you today because we scheduled this so long ago. So thank you so much for your patience. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being here.
I love being here with you. I'm so excited, Sandee. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So you are a certified master life coach. You also have your master's in psychology. Fantastic. And you're a facilitator and owner, co-founder, or founder of a successful coaching practice called Resilience, Life's Gift. I love it. And then you have your own podcast, and we're going to dive into all of that. But first, I want to hear your story. How did you get to where you are today? Because we all have a great story behind us.
We do. Thanks, Sandee. And again, I'm so honored to be here with you. It's funny. I never thought I would be on this journey. And so it's so fun to be able to talk about my story. I started off as a critical care nurse at the age of 21. I worked at the prestigious Mayo Clinic. I always thought that was going to be my journey for the rest of my life. My grandmother was a nurse, and she was my person, and I followed in those footsteps. And I broke my back at the age of 26 lifting a patient. And that set me on a course of 8 spinal surgeries. After my second surgery, a nerve was severed in my back, and I was paralyzed from the waist down and had trouble with walking. And throughout those course of 8 surgeries, you went through the plethora of major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD and all of those things. And with that came an addiction to every type of prescription medication. I ended up with my parents and going through all that and the loss of identity, because it was Nurse Kelly. So with all of that going on, I made very poor choices in my addiction, got behind the wheel of a car, got DUIs, and it just led me down this path of self-destruction, self-sabotage. And I was just existing. I wasn't even living, Sandee. It was just, I never thought I would end up in that place. I went to rehab after rehab. I would get clean. Then I'd have another back surgery. I'd get clean. I'd have another back surgery. And in my last rehab in 2014, I was facing losing my nursing license. I was unemployable. I was facing prison. And I wasn't facing the issues that were underlying. It was like drug was but a symptom of what was underneath. So I hadn't dealt with all the shame and the guilt and the trauma and everything like that. And so my counselors really worked with me on what was going on there. I walked up to the community college the day I got out of rehab, started taking some psychology classes because I needed the loans from school to pay for rent. I was cleaning my sponsor's house to pay for groceries. And it was very truly humbling because, everyone's sitting there with laptops and I'm there with my free backpack from the community college and a big pencil and just kind of shaking, still going through the detox. And I had no idea I was going to pursue this because I was awaiting my prison sentence. So I started taking those classes, and finally the counselor was like, honey, there's no more classes for you to take at community college. You have a bachelor's degree in nursing. Why don't you go get your master's? And all those core beliefs of I'm not good enough and all those came in. I ended up going to do my sentence in jail. And that is, Sandee, where I had my spiritual awakening, because I went to maximum security and my cellmate was in there for first-degree murder.
Oh my gosh.
And I was judging her.
Yeah.
I'm only in here for DUIs. Like, how am I in here with someone that's in here for murder? And so my higher power kind of knocked me to my knees and was like, if you would have hit a child or a family, you'd be in here doing the same amount of time. So what makes you think you're any better? And so I called my sponsor and I had her send me all my recovery stuff, my AA books, my NA books. And we were in our cells for 23 hours a day and out for 1. And I started working with the women in the yard and taking them through the steps and helping them, because everyone in there was in there for mental illness or addiction or things like that. And so from that day on, I dedicated the rest of my life to this work. I got out, went into a master's program, got my master's in psychology, started doing marriage family therapy, liked it, but didn't like being in that box of like just working with people in the past and past issues. Started taking self-mastery classes down in Napa, opened my coaching business, and started working with people on their belief systems, what was holding them back from moving forward. And just started from there. And it just kind of started to take off. And now I speak in elementary schools on on bullying or on mindset. And then I have my own podcast, and then I just keep going and going because I'm just so passionate, Sandee, about I said during the pandemic, mental health is going to be our next pandemic. And I noticed it not getting a lot of attention, and here we are, right? So there's always more work to do. I'm always working on myself. It's a lifelong journey. And that's my story, that there's so much more. That's kind of the
Wow.
short version, but
Wow.
that's where we're at.
It's, yeah, incredible. That's really incredible. And when you were talking about all your surgeries and the addiction, and I'm sure you know this, I mean, of course you were going to become addicted because the drugs they give you are so addictive, period.
Yes.
If you you're in a catch-22 situation because you need them because you're in so much pain, and yet they're highly addictive.
It was such a hard thing for me because I was a nurse. The doctors were prescribing them in such large quantities. And at first, I had never taken a pill before that point, and so you're taking them. And what I realized after too, Sandee, is I was taking them more for the emotional pain than I was for the physical pain, to numb out so many feelings. So it's when I went to those self-mastery classes, and that's what I loved about coaching, is I was like, if they can tell me, that all my actions are mine, that I'm accountable for everything that led me to being in the jail and having horrible things happen to me in that jail that were very traumatic, and I can own my life again, I can feel power over my life again, I'll take it. And, because I'm like, it wasn't my fault to break. I was feeling very victim, it wasn't my fault I broke my back. It wasn't my fault I had to start taking pills. It wasn't my fault.
Right.
And, she's like, no, it's nobody deserves to break their back. Nobody deserves that. But what choices did you make that led you up to being in that jail cell, that led you to going through that trauma? And that's what I love about the coaching experiences is, you don't have power over certain things, but you can step into your power and take accountability for choices. So I look back on my journey now, and every client that comes to me at 43 years of age, Sandee, I can be like, oh yeah, like either I've been there, I've experienced it, or I can empathize with the feeling that they're having, whether
Right.
it's, addiction, powerlessness, frustration, grief. So it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to empower so many people and help them feel power over their lives again,
Yeah. So I don't talk about this that much on my podcast, although I do share it when I'm a guest on other people's podcasts. My ex-husband, who is a very successful lawyer, was driving drunk, hit a motorcycle, and killed 2 people. And he was in prison for 7 years. He's been out now since December of 2021. And during that time for me, I had to put my whole life on hold because I was in almost like a fight or flight mentality because I had a child to raise on my own. And we were left almost destitute after the accident happened. And, I'm a survivor, a thriver.
Yes.
I prefer to say, I'm a thriver. And, I always knew I was going to be okay. And yet, the thing is that it's really easy to, look at our situation and compare it to another. Right.
Yes.
And, and I'm sure he did some of that as well in the beginning. And then he, toward the end of his term, he was like, yeah, we're all there. We all are there for, what he was saying was that almost everybody in the prison system, most of them always go back to drugs and alcohol in some way, shape, or form.
Yes. And thank you for sharing that and for your vulnerability. I can't imagine how that must have felt for you. And it is a family disease, it affects so many people in the family system, you and your child. And that was my experience. We were in the maximum security and people couldn't even come in because we were too high risk. Nobody's getting the help that they need in there,
Exactly.
So then they they go out and they continue to do exactly what they were doing with no help. And
Right.
so that at the time I went in, I had a year clean. And so I was working and doing, internship at a recovery center. So I kept calling and sending people to my recovery center. And finally my supervisor, I called her from, collect call from, and she's like, honey, I love you. I love what you're trying to do, but we don't have any more spots, because I kept trying to send people, because to your ex-husband's point, we're not getting any resources in there.
Yeah.
If anything, they're giving you drugs we call the Thorazine shuffle. People are walking around just kind of like this, and then they're unmedicated when they get out. And so it hurts my heart. I get very emotional about this because there's only so many of us that are trying to reach at a bigger reach, to help people
Yeah.
with this.
Yeah.
You don't think you're going to be the one. And
No,
I
of
got
course
behind
not.
the wheel of a car so many times, and those were only the times I got caught. You
Right.
don't think you're going to be the one to hurt somebody or harm somebody with your choices. And it's so freeing for me to be accountable for all my choices today, because I know I'm one pill or one drink away from being back there.
That's right.
So to be able to empower people and help people and know that it affects the people in your family. My mother and I did a podcast, the two sides of the addiction coin, her perspective when I was in my addiction and mine. I never knew
Wow.
how she felt. And they
Wow.
were two totally different perspectives, So it's really impactful, to know how it affected you and your child, to see how, we need more resources for people. I just opened a second resilience in Grass Valley where I got clean and sober, because that's always been my dream, to remain grateful and humble where I came from, to help so many people there. So, I'm trying to reach to however many people I can. And what's so frustrating about it is we're not going to get help until we're ready. I mean, people told me until my face was blue to get help, and until I was ready, it's such it hurts my heart because it's still such an epidemic.
Well, people aren't going to do anything. They're not going to make any changes in their life until they're ready to make that change. Doesn't
Right.
matter. Doesn't matter if it's, just stop eating so much desserts, or or quitting smoking or drinking or shopping addiction, sex addiction, gambling. It's all, until somebody is ready, it's not going to happen. And here's the
That's
thing. People, it's so uncomfortable making that change. And that's why, in
it.
order to grow, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I say this, it's getting to the point where I almost say this like every single podcast.
I want to get the tattoo, Sandee. I want to get the tattoo,
Right.
because when we coach, I mean, isn't it the same? I mean, it's like people stay comfortable and it leads to a life of being uncomfortable, where if they get a little uncomfortable for a minute,
Yes,
they're going to lead a life that's very comfortable. But
that's right.
they're afraid to get there. And it's so, they stay in their little box of comfort. I call it the 9-dot square, because inside that 9-dot square, it's like this illusion of control. They're not really in control. It's an
No,
illusion of control, but they
right.
feel safety and they can manipulate and this. And I'm like, that's your content though. That's your content. It's what you believe to be true. But if we get outside that box and put it into context, right? Like, how are you contributing to the problem by either your reactions to it or your inaction when there's a problem? It all comes back to you, right?
Oh,
And you
yeah.
have to have a desire to change. You have to have the desire first, and then you got to make the decision. And I said this on, I had Jim Britt on my podcast last
Oh,
week,
nice.
and he said, when you make that decision, there can't be any room for it to be any other way, but we leave a little gap to make, when we make decisions, to be like, to make little excuses, like, okay, I'm going to make a decision to lose weight, but on Sundays or Easter or whatever, I'm going to have that piece of cake. He's like, you got to seal that circle, right? There can't be any room for there to be any other way when you make that desired decision, and I see it all the time. And I say to my clients, when I lost all my excuses, I found my results, you know, but
That's
it's,
right.
it's, I love laughing with my clients because they know with me now. Did you do your homework assignment? I did, Kelly, and I just look at them. They're like, I know, no buts, no buts. But I'm like, you either did or you didn't. right? Like there's no ifs, So I love it. I mean, I love talking about getting uncomfortable. Because it only happens outside your comfort zone. It only
That's
happens
right.
there.
I love it. And I love how you explain that. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So you had talked a little bit also about feeling like a victim.
Yes.
And that's a hard place to get out of. I was there for a very long time
Yes.
myself,
Yes.
after my brother died when I was 12 years old. And I did feel like a victim from that. And then, of course, it just crosses over into every other area of your life, because when you have that mentality, you're always going to be that victim. So for
Yes.
you, what was some steps that you took to help you get to a point where you could see that this happened for me and not to me?
Yes. So the mindset work. Yeah. Thanks. That's a great question. It was for me, I started focusing on not what my body couldn't do for me, but what it could. Not what my mind couldn't do for me, but what it could. And I think what happened for me again was those self-mastery classes where I got a really good look at myself. And I love how you worded that. I started learning to ask myself better questions. And when I learned to ask myself better questions, it changed the trajectory of my life. So, like you said, instead of saying, why is this happening to me? I learned to ask myself, why is this happening for me? And what can I learn from this experience? So, for example, I had to get clear on what my values were. So, it's not a motivation problem, it's a clarity problem. So, what do I value? I didn't know what I valued. So I got really clear on that, right? I value my family. I value my faith. I value nature. I value this. And then I got clear on what is it I want to do? Okay, I want to feel better. I want to have more close interpersonal relationships. Why? Why is that important to me? And why does that matter? I want to feel safe and secure. I want to feel loved, those types of things. And then it came back to my values, right? So everything was kind of in alignment for me. So that was like, okay, this is happening for me. This experience happened for me to show me how resilient I am, how strong I am, right? Those types of things. And so I started building on that. Then I started to look at things more optimistically, not with like rose colored glasses, right? But just optimistically. I started to find humor in things. And I started to find like the strengths I had instead of every weakness that I had. And so that started to change my mindset a little bit. I also didn't compare myself to others' journeys as well, right? Like I would
Yeah.
look at other people and go, oh, she's so much further along than me. Oh, well, she had 2 back surgeries and she's already back at work. Oh, she's doing this, right? Instead, I would ask them questions. Hey, you're doing a lot better. Can you share with me how you did that? I would get it guidance and feedback, right? And I wouldn't take it as criticism. I would learn from it. I also sought out mentorship. I didn't need to have a lot of money at first, right? Because I didn't. But I would find people that I wanted to learn from, who I wanted what they had, and I would take guidance from them as well, right? So there was a lot of different things I started to do that didn't necessarily need me to like spend a lot of money at first when I was, because people are like, I don't have money to seek out mentorship. Get on online, right? Just type in, listen to a podcast, right? Like 30 minutes of new input every day, Sandee.
Yes.
If you're interested in something, instead of like binge watching or spending time on your phone or just checking out, right? Look up an article you're interested in. If you have anxiety, like I was having anxiety, I would look up like how to overcome anxiety, right? And I didn't take one huge step every day either, right? I would just move that needle a little bit. Sometimes maybe I
Yes.
could just look up the article and then put it down, right? Maybe I couldn't walk a mile with my back, but maybe I could just get outside and put my face up to the sun and then go back inside. So just little steps every day helped me to kind of overcome. And then I'd be like, I'm really proud of myself today, right? Instead of, I only did this today, right?
Right.
So I watched how I talked to myself because I was listening. So
Yeah.
all those little things, you can't lift 1,000 pounds in a day, but you can lift 1 pound 1,000 times. So those small repeated efforts every day kind of got me there.
Well, yeah. And resilience, I always teach, um, my clients, because I work with a lot of elite athletes, it's like a muscle. So, when you compare it to a
Yes,
muscle, resilience is like a muscle, confidence is a muscle. It's
yes,
all, when you look at it that way, and you're not going to build that muscle strength overnight. And it's like just 1% better every day. And
every day.
celebrate those wins.
Yes,
So important, because when we celebrate those wins, you're actually reprogramming your subconscious mind.
yes.
And
And
it's
creating
going to,
those new neural pathways.
yes, exactly.
Yes. And that's it, Sandy. 1%, just consistency,
Yep.
consistency, consistency. And when you do that, like you said, you're every time you do that and you're proud of yourself, you create those new neural pathways.
Right.
Every time then you come and speak negatively, it shuts those pathways, you know?
Yep.
So then instead of creating that negative feedback loop, you're creating that reticular activating system that becomes more familiar for you. It's like when you buy a new car and you're like, nobody will have this car. And then you buy it and you see that car everywhere on the road. That's your reticular activating system. That's like when you start to tell yourself something new that's not familiar, like, oh, I did good today. And then you take a little walk, you're like, I did good today. That becomes familiar for you now.
Right.
Right. And so it's just then you start building that confidence. And that 1%. Confidence is acquired. People are like, how do I get confidence? It's acquired by doing exactly
Mhm.
what you just said. 1% every day.
Yeah.
So I just kept going, and I didn't just talk about it, right? I remember I would tell my mom, I'm gonna go back to school and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do this. She's like, stop telling me, show me,
Right.
right? So I started to put it into action a little bit too every day. So it was just important to do all those little things. I remember I would go over to my mom's and I'd keep lifting up my sunglasses, and she's like, you don't need to show me your eyes anymore. I know you're clean. Now just go and like do your thing. So I just went on my own little journey, and I didn't need it to be clear and specific. It was like I found my own spiritual journey.
Yeah.
It didn't have to look like anybody else's,
That's
you
right.
know?
Because
It
it's
didn't
your
have to
journey.
it's my journey.
And you're
So
on this journey for a reason.
yes,
Everything I always, we were playing a little game when I was getting together with my book club. And somebody said to me, if there was one thing you can change your life, what would it be? And I go, nothing. And they're like, nothing? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I am who I am today because of everything that I've gone through. And I wouldn't change a thing. I
me
wouldn't change
neither.
one little thing of it.
Man, I love you. Yes.
Yeah,
That and people think I'm kind of nutty. The ones that haven't done all the spiritual work, it's like I would not change one thing. And because if 1 second would have been different, and I would not be on this podcast speaking with you.
that's right.
Every relationship, every journey, every trial, every tribulation got me exactly in this moment to be speaking with you.
Yep.
And I love the work because I've gained lessons from every single experience. I used to be so shameful about my past. And the minute I started sharing about it, I would share when I got the Intoxilock out of my car. I'd share when I got my ankle monitor off. And people were like, oh, me too. It gave people permission to do the same and
That's
not have
right.
to suffer in silence. And sometimes I forget that I'm on the other side of it. I'm like, oh, I'm sharing my story, but people are still suffering with it. And so I took the thing that I was most shameful of and most afraid to speak about and turned it into my greatest, truest, unique gift to the world to help others. And
Mm,
people are now like, feel like they can talk about it without shame because it's a disease. I was such in dis-ease
you're right.
over in my addiction, you
That's right.
know? So I love being able to talk about I would not change one thing about my journey, not one.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Kelly, this has just been so amazing. And we
Oh
could talk for
man.
hours. So is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share with the audience today? And make sure you also give people your website and how they can find you.
Yeah, I just want to tell anybody if you are struggling, if you are going through anything, there are so many resources available to you. I have been following Sandee. She's just, oh man, one of the most amazing women makes me emotional. And I am here. We are opening, group coaching at lower affordable rates, for people that are struggling. And my website is www.myresiliencecoach.com. And Sandee, I just want to thank you for allowing me to share with you and meeting your beautiful soul, and anything I can do to support you, because I love women, empowering women. And it's just been a blessing to be here with you today. Thank you for sharing your space and time and energy with me.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, it's been amazing. And I do want to also mention all of this will be in the show notes. And how Kelly and I got connected is that we both were in the Change book series. That's Les Brown wrote the forward in that.
Yeah.
And that's the fastest personal development book series in the world. And it was
Yes,
such an honor to be included in that with you as well.
absolutely.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much. Thank you to all the listeners. And just, check out Kelly and her website. And gosh, so much wisdom and knowledge you have to share. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sandee. You as well. Blessings.
Thank you.
All right.